My name is Noah Cross. They locked me in a garage, fed me lies, and used me for a paycheck. For years, I was the forgotten foster kid in the house that pretended to care. But I didn't stay broken. I disappeared, rebuilt myself in silence, and came back not for revenge, but to take everything they thought I'd never have. Before we dive in, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that cuts deep. And stick around till the end, because this isn't just about betrayal. It's about rising from the ashes and reclaiming what was stolen. Let's begin. I still remember the sound of my mother's tires on the gravel driveway, that slow crunching fade as her beat-up Honda disappeared into the Connecticut fog. I was 8, holding a plastic bag with 3 t-shirts, a cracked toy truck, and a note folded so many times it looked like it wanted to disappear too. I stood on the porch of the Langford home in West Haven, staring at the big white columns and the red brick steps that looked like something from a magazine. I thought it was a mansion. Thought maybe I'd lucked out. Thought maybe this was a new beginning. I thought a lot of things back then. Carol Langford answered the door with a warm, practiced smile. "You must be Noah," she said sweetly, hands clasped like she was greeting a guest instead of a dropped-off child. She was tall, thin, with frosted hair that didn't move when she did. I stepped inside, careful not to scuff the rug. Everything smelled like lemon cleaner and something faintly floral, like she sprayed peace into the air every morning. A photo of a smiling family hung in the hallway: Carol, her husband Peter, and their son Ryan. All blonde, all beaming. I didn't belong in that picture, and I knew it right away. Peter Langford appeared briefly from his study. He looked at me, nodded once, and disappeared again without a word. Later, I'd learned that was his way, absent, detached, like parenting was something to observe from a distance. Ryan was 12, lanky and smug, with a voice that always carried just enough mockery to let you know you were beneath him. He didn't say hi, just stared at me like I'd tracked dirt into his world. Carol showed me to the garage. "We converted this last year, just for guests," she said with that same fixed smile. There was a narrow cot against one wall, a dresser missing 2 knobs, and a single dusty window. The floor was concrete, cold even with the rug she'd thrown over it. A space heater buzzed in the corner like it was trying to warm more than it could. I set down my bag. She handed me a folded blanket and a pillow that smelled like lavender detergent. "Make yourself at home," she said, already halfway out the door, but it wasn't home. That night, I lay awake listening to the heater hum and the muffled sounds of dinner dishes clinking in the kitchen I wasn't invited to. I could smell baked ziti and garlic bread through the door. My stomach growled. No one had asked if I'd eaten. The garage creaked with every gust of wind, every settling timber, but I didn't cry. I couldn't afford to. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and told myself a lie I needed to believe. They're just waiting to get to know me. I didn't know it yet, but the Langfords weren't my salvation. They were just the next betrayal. It didn't take long for the truth to settle in. I was never meant to be part of the Langfords family. I was a prop in their performance. Each morning started with the same cold ritual. I'd wake to the click of the heater flipping off. Carol's way of reminding me that electricity wasn't free. The garage was always freezing in the winter, damp in the spring, and sweltering come July. Still, I never complained. I learned early that complaints got you nothing but colder nights and tighter rules. Carol's public face was all sunshine. At church, she introduced me as our sweet Noah, gently squeezing my shoulder like she loved me. But at home, that same hand would point to the fridge with a warning. Ask permission before taking anything. Sometimes I'd find the fridge padlocked when she left for errands. Even the bread was counted. Ryan, her golden-haired son, took his cues from her. At school, he ignored me. At home, he made sure I never forgot what I was. You know they get paid to keep you, right? he whispered one night, right before lights out. "You're a paycheck in shoes." I said nothing. I just stared at the wall, tracing a crack in the plaster that ran like a river over my bed. Words had weight, but silence could crush them. When he got bored, Ryan stole my things. My toy truck went missing the first week. A library book I was supposed to return ended up in the toilet. Once, he smeared ketchup into the only hoodie I had and told Carol I did it for attention. She didn't ask questions. She just took it and threw it in the trash. Peter watched all of it from the shadows. He was a ghost in that house. Always half present, half drunk. If I passed him in the hall, he'd give me a grunt or nod. I'd catch him sometimes, looking at me longer than felt comfortable, like he wanted to say something, like he knew something, but he never did. My days blurred into weeks. I got used to taking shorter showers. Carol timed them. I learned to do laundry when no one was home, so I could sneak extra detergent. I waited until midnight to eat crackers I hid under the mattress. No one asked how I was. No one hugged me. No one said goodnight. Still, I kept my head down. I got good grades. I smiled when I was supposed to. The Langfords liked their foster kids quiet and obedient, so I gave them exactly that. But deep down, something else was growing. Not bitterness. Not yet. Something quieter. Sharper. Awareness that I wasn't really part of their family. That no matter how well I played the role, I'd always be the boy in the garage. And one day, they'd regret leaving me there. You learn to count in foster care, but not numbers the way they teach in school. You count how many slices of bread are in the bag each morning. You count how many seconds it takes Carol to notice when something's missing. You count the footsteps outside your door and know which ones are safe and which ones bring trouble. At the Langford house, survival wasn't about screaming matches or bruises. It was about quiet control. Precision. Appearances. Carol started locking the fridge when I was 10. At first, she blamed budgeting. Then discipline. Eventually, she didn't explain at all. She had a small key she wore on a chain under her blouse. I used to watch it swing when she leaned over to wipe invisible crumbs from the counter. Everything in the pantry was labeled with masking tape. Cereal, for school days only. Apples, 1 per day. There was even a label on the butter, used sparingly. By then, I understood the game. If I asked too often, she said I was greedy. If I stayed silent, she called me ungrateful. The goal was never to be full. It was to need just enough to stay dependent. Dinner was always the same routine. Carol cooked for 3, Peter, Ryan, and herself. I got the leftovers, if there were any. Sometimes it was a slice of dry meatloaf. Other times, a scoop of overcooked rice scraped from the bottom of the pot. We didn't eat together. I sat in the garage with a paper plate in my lap, listening to their laughter through the walls. Peter was no better. After dinner, he'd retreat into his study and close the door. I sometimes heard him muttering, typing, or pouring something into a glass. Once, I knocked to ask for help with homework. He opened the door, looked down at me, and said, "That's Carol's job." Before shutting it again, I began to notice how things worked. Carol always picked up the mail first. Any letters from the state, payment summaries, case worker updates, they went into a locked drawer in the dining room hutch. When visitors came, like social workers or church ladies, I was cleaned up, dressed in button-ups too small for me, and coached on what to say. She treats me like her own. I love living here. I'm grateful. I said all the right things, but I was starting to see it for what it was, a performance. And I was just a supporting actor in their little theater of generosity. The kicker? One night, I overheard Carol on the phone with a friend. "Oh, we don't really need the stipend, but it helps with groceries. And it teaches Ryan compassion, you know?" I almost laughed. Compassion? Ryan once poured dish soap into my laundry bin because I wouldn't let him copy my homework that night. I didn't sleep. I sat on my cot in the garage, staring at the ceiling fan that never worked. I wasn't their son. I wasn't even their guest. I was income. A tax break in shoes. But they were about to raise something they never budgeted for, me. Peter Langford died on a Thursday. He collapsed in his study sometime before dawn. Carol found him slumped over his desk, half-finished drink by his hand. The room smelling faintly of bourbon and dust. She didn't scream. Carol didn't do drama. She simply called 911, then Ryan, then the pastor. By breakfast, the casserole dishes from neighbors had already started arriving. I stayed quiet, as always. Not from grief, but from confusion. Peter hadn't been cruel like Ryan or calculated like Carol. He just vanished behind a door and stayed there. I never understood him, and now I'd never get the chance to try. The funeral was pristine. Clean-cut men in black suits, a eulogy about hard work and family values, all delivered under a white tent in the cemetery near the water. Carol cried for exactly 3 minutes. Ryan wore his father's watch like a trophy. They didn't invite me to speak. Afterward, the house became a museum of mourning. Carol played Grieving Widow, and Ryan played the Golden Sun. I played Invisible. I was told to make myself useful, which meant cleaning out Peter's study, boxing up files, books, and stacks of forgotten envelopes. That's when I found the box. It was marked Office, Donate. Inside, old tax documents, some worn paperbacks, and a manila envelope with one word scrawled on it in blue ink. Noah. My heart stuttered. I looked around the empty room, then opened it. Inside was a folded letter and a birth certificate. My birth certificate. The name on the line for father, Peter Langford. I stared at it for what felt like hours. My ears ringing, skin buzzing. The letter was dated 5 years earlier. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakably Peter's. Noah, if you're reading this, then I wasn't brave enough to say it out loud. But you deserve to know. I am your father. Your mother never told me about you until after you were already here. I didn't know how to fix things without ruining what I had with Carol and Ryan. So I stayed silent. That was wrong. I should have done more. I watched you grow up from the shadows of this house, and hated myself for every second you spent in that garage. I hope someday you'll understand. Maybe even forgive me. But if nothing else, know that you are mine. And you deserve better than all of this. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it back up and slid the envelope into my pocket. Carol had known. So had Ryan. They all knew who I was. They put me in the garage anyway. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just lay on my cot, fingers curled around the letter like it was a lifeline. For the first time, I knew exactly who I was, and what they had stolen from me. I wasn't the foster kid anymore. I was the rightful son. And they had no idea what was coming. The letter burned in my pocket like a live wire. Peter Langford was my father. It explained everything and nothing. His silence. His stares. The way he flinched when Carol snapped at me. He knew. He always knew. And still, he let me sleep in a cold garage while his real family sat down to steak dinners and private school planning. I stayed quiet for 3 days. Observed. Watched Carol float through the house like grief had granted her sainthood. Watched Ryan gloat as he dug through Peter's old desk, whispering to his friends about his inheritance. I moved through the house like smoke, unseen, but listening to everything. I knew I had to confront her. She was standing at the kitchen counter folding thank you cards when I walked in, the letter clutched in my hand. I found something, I said. Carol didn't look up. If it's junk, just put it in the box for goodwill. It had my name on it. That made her pause. I held out the envelope. He was my father. Carol blinked once. The twitch at the corner of her mouth betrayed her. Not surprise. Not denial. Just calculation. So he told you, she said, flat as an empty plate. You knew? I asked, my voice low and shaking. I always knew, she said, her voice tightening. Your mother dropped you off here like a stray dog. What was I supposed to do? Send you away and create a scandal? Peter begged me to keep you. I made it work. You made me sleep in the garage. You were lucky to have a roof at all, she snapped, finally looking at me. Her eyes were cold, stripped of the Sunday smiles and PDA performance. Don't act like you were owed something. You weren't part of this family. I stared at her, really stared. The mask she wore so perfectly was cracking. The woman who preached charity at church luncheons was gone. In her place was someone I didn't fear anymore. Someone smaller. I was his son, I said. And you made me feel like garbage. Her laugh was dry. And what do you plan to do with that now? Cry to a judge? Good luck. Peter left everything to me and Ryan. You got what you were worth. I didn't respond, because she was wrong. I had something far more dangerous than money. I had a story. And I had time. That night, I packed a duffel bag with everything I owned, 3 shirts, 2 pairs of socks, and Peter's letter. I slipped out before sunrise. No one noticed. No one stopped me. I didn't look back. I walked to the West Haven bus station, bought a one-way ticket to New Haven, and boarded with a single promise burning in my chest. They had tried to bury me in lies, but I would rise, and one day, I'd come back, not for closure, for everything they thought I'd never be strong enough to take. New Haven was loud, gray, and indifferent. Perfect. No one asked where you came from. No one cared if you had a place to go at night, as long as you stayed out of their way. That suited me just fine. At 17, I slept on church basement floors and learned how to stretch $5 across 3 days. I washed dishes at a diner on Chapel Street during the day, stacked crates at a warehouse at night. Most mornings, my fingers were cracked, my back stiff, but my mind was sharper than ever. I read everything I could get my hands on, used library computers to study finance, business structures, property law. I watched how money moved, how property flipped, how fortunes built quietly behind the noise. The first break came from a man named Tito who ran a landscaping crew. He liked that I didn't talk much and didn't complain. After a year, he let me crash in his cousin's spare room. That room came with something I hadn't had in years: silence, warmth, and a lock on the door that I owned the key to. By 20, I had saved enough to get certified as an HVAC technician. That led to bigger gigs, contracts, jobs with property managers who were too busy to notice a quiet kid with a clipboard watching how they cut corners and doubled profits. At 22, I took a leap. Bought my first foreclosed home in Bridgeport, with a down payment scraped together from 3 years of side jobs. Mold in the basement, rats in the attic. But I cleaned it, flipped it, and sold it within 6 months, earning almost double what I'd put in. By 25, I owned 3 more. I changed my name. Legally. I dropped Noah Langford like dead weight and became Noah Cross. It felt clean. Intentional. No one could tie it back to Carol or Ryan. I was free. I didn't live loud. No flashy cars. No penthouses. I moved in silence, let LLCs and shell companies hold my assets. I walked in thrift store jeans and bought commercial property in cash. Every time someone underestimated me, I smiled. Because the more invisible I was, the easier it became to grow. By 30, I was worth 7 figures. Quietly. Fully. But none of it was enough to erase the cold sting of being called a paycheck in shoes. I'd traded in the garage for granite countertops, but the memory still sat in the back of my mind like a bruise that never fully faded. Then, One crisp October afternoon, I saw the listing, the Langford house, up for sale. Foreclosure pending. Carol had defaulted. Ryan was nowhere to be found. My hands didn't shake as I signed the purchase agreement. My voice didn't falter when I wired the deposit. I didn't smile until I walked past the white columns of that brick porch again, this time with keys in hand. They thought they'd lock me out forever, but brick by brick, I'd build my way back home. I didn't want them to know it was me, not yet, so I used a shell company, Eastgate Holdings, LLC. Registered quietly, cleanly. Just another faceless developer in a market full of them. No suspicion. No headlines. The Langford house, my house, was already deep in foreclosure. Carol had taken out a second mortgage trying to fund her image. The upkeep, the neighborhood dues, the illusion of control, it all cost more than she could afford once Peter was gone and Ryan couldn't hold a job to save his life. They held on for as long as they could. But the notices piled up. Then the auction listing went live. I didn't just buy the house. I bought 3 more on the same cul-de-sac. One belonged to Mrs. Klein, who used to glare at me from her porch like I'd brought mildew with me. Another belonged to the Vasquez family, church friends of the Langfords, who never once asked why the foster kid walked to school alone in winter. It was poetic, really. The same community that once judged me now signed leases I controlled. Their fate, their addresses, their comfort, all in my hands. And none of them knew it. Not yet. I walked the Langford house the morning after the sale closed. The lawn was patchy. The shutters were peeling. The white columns looked more like tombstones now. The lock clicked open in my hand, smooth and final. Inside, everything was exactly how I remembered it, and worse. The framed family photos still lined the hallways. Ryan's middle school trophies gathered dust. The dining room hutch still stood, and I swear I could hear Carol's voice hissing at me to count the bread. I stood in the kitchen where she used to ration food like punishment and ran my fingers along the counter. "Welcome home," I whispered. The final confrontation wasn't far off. I didn't want revenge served hot or loud. I wanted them to choke on their silence the same way I had, so I had my attorney draft a letter. Professional. Cold. A formal notice of eviction. Dated. Legal. Final. I had it delivered by courier, just like the banks used to deliver her overdue notices. She'd read it. She'd see the name, Eastgate Holdings. She wouldn't recognize it. Yet, I gave them 10 days. 10 days to pack up the life they stole from me. 10 days before I showed up at the front door, not as the kid in the garage, but as the man who owned the land beneath their feet. They used to lock up food. They used to count the bread. They used to count me out. Now I was counting down. 10 days. Then the truth wouldn't just knock. It would walk in, sit at the head of the table, and reclaim what was always his. I waited until the 10th day. The sun was just dipping behind the maples lining the cul-de-sac when I pulled up. Same street, same house. But I wasn't the same boy who once stood trembling on that porch. I was wearing a black wool coat, pressed slacks, and calm like armor. In one hand, I held a slim manila envelope. In the other, the key to the front door. Carol answered before I knocked. She must have seen the car, sleek, expensive, silent. At first, she didn't recognize me. Age does that. I was taller now. Leaner. My jaw sharper, voice deeper, but then she did. Her eyes widened, and her lips parted like she was about to greet me with one of her old sugar-slick smiles. "Noah?" I nodded once. "Mrs. Langford." Ryan appeared behind her, his face slack with confusion. His hair had thinned out, and he wore sweatpants that hung off his frame like defeat. No more Letterman jackets. No more swagger, just rot. I handed her the envelope. "You're being evicted. The property now belongs to Eastgate Holdings. You've had 10 days. She didn't take it at first. just stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. You bought the house? I stepped forward. Not just the house. The land? The mortgage? Half the neighborhood. Ryan scoffed. This is a joke. No, I said calmly. This is justice. Carol finally grabbed the envelope, her hands trembling. You were nothing when you left. A foster case with garbage clothes and a smart mouth. And now you're, what? Some rich businessman playing games? I stared at her, expressionless. I was your husband's son. You made me sleep in a garage and eat cold leftovers while you posed as some saint at church potlucks. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. You had the truth, I said, stepping inside uninvited. You buried it. You buried me. But I grew anyway. The living room hadn't changed. Same floral curtains. Same framed photos of Ryan's high school graduation, Carol's charity award, Peter's forced smiles. I looked at it all like a man revisiting the scene of a crime. Ryan took a step forward, fists clenched. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said, turning toward him. It makes me free. Carol's voice cracked. Please. This is our home. No, I said, cold and certain. It was never yours to begin with. You stole it. You stole me. I turned to leave. You have 48 hours, I said over my shoulder. After that, I come back with a sheriff. I didn't slam the door behind me. I didn't raise my voice, because revenge, real revenge, doesn't need theatrics. It only needs silence. And steel. And I had become both. The house was quiet after they left. No shouting. No slamming doors. No Carol pacing in her robe, muttering about grocery bills and image. No Ryan's voice behind me, sneering insults through gritted teeth. Just silence, the kind that felt like breath instead of pressure. They were gone. I walked room to room for hours that first night. Let the echoes find me. The kitchen where I was never allowed to snack without permission. The hallway where I once stood barefoot, listening to laughter I was never part of. The garage. Cold and still, just like I remembered, only this time, I didn't sleep there. I slept in the master bedroom, and when I woke the next morning, it wasn't revenge I felt, it was clarity. Everything they'd built on lies, I now owned with truth. But I didn't want their house. I didn't want their ghosts. I wanted something better, so I tore it down, metaphorically first, then literally. I brought in architects, contractors, social workers. Explained my vision without explaining my past. I wanted to keep the bones of the place, but rebuild the soul. By spring, the Langford house was reborn as the Cross home, a transitional center for foster youth aging out of the system. Kids like I once was. Invisible. Overlooked. Hungry for a place to belong. Each room was redesigned with purpose. No garages turned into bedrooms. No locked pantries. Every child who walked through those doors got a warm bed, 3 hot meals, and a teen that looked them in the eye when they spoke. I even left one photo on the wall, not of the Langfords, but of Peter, the man who never had the courage to speak, but gave me just enough truth to start over. One afternoon, a boy named Marcus wandered in with a trash bag full of clothes and shoes too small for his feet. He looked up at me the same way I once looked at Peter, unsure, cautious, tired. I knelt down, handed him a key with his name engraved on it. You don't have to earn this, I told him. It's already yours. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was redemption. Carol once called me a burden. Ryan treated me like a ghost. The world turned its back on me before I even knew how to spell my own name in cursive. But now I was home. And more than that, I was building a home for others. One they didn't have to earn. One no one could take away. My true home wasn't in bricks, or contracts, or payback. It was in every scared kid who walked in carrying shame and left carrying dignity. It was in the silence that no longer hurt. It was in becoming everything they said I'd never be. And I did it without raising my voice. I did it by building something they never could hope. If Noah's journey moved you, if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or silenced, don't just sit with that feeling. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that pain can be fuel, and healing is the most powerful form of revenge. Like, comment, and subscribe for more real, raw stories of survival, justice, and transformation. And remember, you are not what they did to you, you are what you build from it.